The sun has left and forgotten me.
Your stories don't define you, but how you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker at Elkins Consulting. Whether you're sharing personal stories or professional stories, the stories you choose to tell and how you tell them can make a big impact in how you're being perceived by the people around you. As always, you've heard me say, it's not about the epic stories, it's about the meaningful stories. So make sure that you are sharing the stories that you want people to know about who you are and what matters to you. If you want to learn more, check out my job interview storytelling course on Udemy. Visit elkinsconsulting.com to learn more. Listeners, you're in for a treat today. I'm sitting here on my living room couch with my friend Mary Riitano. We've known each other a very long time, and I've been inspired in observing and participating in her journey as an actress living in a small town in Montana. She's had to go to great lengths to earn the stripes that she has now. She's had to travel across the country and overseas to develop who she is as an actress. And she's had to learn how to share her stories in ways that are compelling. But even more importantly, she has to learn to tell other people's stories as if she had experienced themselves and be even more compelling. Mary, thank you so much for joining me today.
I am so tickled to be here, sitting on your couch with you.
Me too. I love this. I love recording these in person.
Yes, me too.
I think what it makes me think of is that people that are listening can pretend they're sitting here with us.
Yes, please do when you're listening.
Glass of water, a glass of wine, grab your favorite beverage and enjoy this conversation with us.
Yeah, pull up a chair, get cozy.
Absolutely. So, I usually start my podcast episodes by asking my guests to share something about themselves that most people might not know about them. And I know you've put a lot out there about who you are and your history, but I'm pretty sure you have something in there that people, especially people who know you now, might not know about your past.
That is an amazing question. And I would say when I talk to people, I'll get resounding responses of how confident I am, how, as you said, compelling, how forward moving I am. I think the thing that might surprise people is how much self-doubt I still struggle with and how many internal wars I've gone through in myself and still do to stay available for the opportunities around me and to take the opportunities around me. Sometimes it's downright terrifying. I feel downright terrified. And when I do express that, sometimes I'm often met with very curious looks like, no, you're not terrified. I said, yeah, actually I am. I'm very terrified right now, but I'm, this show must go on.
Right. I'm scared on the inside.
I'm scared on the inside. Yes.
I remember saying that to my boys when they were little, when I would, like a spider. We live in an old 1890 home with a dirt foundation under us. And we have quite a few big brown house spiders that sometimes make their way up into the house. And I remember one time catching one and putting it outside, which
that's brave.
is really scary. Yeah. And I remember I was very calm because the boys were in the room. Well, our 13-year-old neighbor had been visiting and she had jumped up to sit on the kitchen counter because she was so freaked out by the spider. And when the boys left the room and I dumped the spider outside, I came back in. She said, I can't believe you just did that. That was so brave. And I'm like, I know, it was terrifying. And she looked at me. She said, you weren't afraid? And I said, oh, honey, I was terrified on the inside. And she just started laughing.
Yes, that mask that we wear on the outside, we've got to get through this in a brave way. And you don't want to show any of the stuff on the inside. But remembering that it's there is what makes us real.
Absolutely. It also, what I think of when you say that that despite the outward appearance of confidence and competence, that you still have this blinding self-doubt sometimes. I think about that when people talk about the imposter phenomenon. And I get it in some sense that we need to find a way to manage that and not struggle with it so much. But the other part of me thinks this is part of what keeps me humble, is knowing that I'm not all that, right? And in my heart, knowing that I still have room to grow. I still have more to learn. And if I, air quote, get over the whole imposter thing, then where does that leave me? Then do I suddenly believe that I'm an expert? I don't know, without ever realizing that you still have room to grow.
Yes, I completely hear what you're saying and where you're coming from. Yeah, I think that fear, that self-doubt, if a person or myself, when I take a look at it closer, it means that what I'm doing matters to me, and it matters to me in the art that I deliver. And I think that there's no end to the researching that we can do in ourselves with the different fears that come up, because with each character I do, there's an examination of your psyche on such different sides. And sometimes you can't believe, can I actually find that in myself? And you say, yes, I can. And to be able to bring that to life and put it into the story and make yourself basically available for every judgment that exists coming from the outside in it's terrifying and humbling, and also an honor, because I am actually bringing a full life to life. And that does include the things that we're afraid of, that we ruminate on in self-doubt.
Okay, well, now I have to ask about my favorite film that you were in, which is Swing. And for our listeners, it's a very short film. It's 22 minutes long?
Right.
So it's 22 minutes long. I saw it when it was screened at our little Myrna Loy Center for the Performing Arts, which is in Helena, Montana, because Myrna Loy is from here. She went to high school in Helena. She grew up in Radersburg for some of her life, which is just about 40 miles down the road from us. So I remember screening that with a couple of my friends, and the place was packed. We showed up, and it was sub-zero temperatures.
It was 26 below zero.
Not just sub-zero, 26 below zero. And the three of us went together, and we're like, ooh, well, yep, we're going to go. We're going to show up. And the place was full. I think there were only a handful of empty seats, which was awesome. I remember sitting there looking at my friends and thinking, this is because Mary shows up for everybody else. Everybody else is finally showing up for Mary. And that film, I didn't have any expectations. I knew nothing about what it was about. And I only knew the other actor in it, Andy Cottrell, who's also a good friend of ours. And I think I was partway through the movie, maybe 10 minutes in, when I had this overwhelming sense, holy shit, Mary, this is amazing. And by the end of the movie, I could not stop smiling. That movie was so you and not you at the same time. And I finally saw really how you embody a character. And it was magical. That is I think it's one of my favorite films all time, because I still think about it.
That's awesome. And sitting on the couch with you and you being all lit up and talking all the magical language, it makes me feel good. It's why, as maybe cliche or corny as it sounds, that's why I do what I do. It's to create these conversations outside or inside of the viewing of a film. And my greatest hope and faith is when someone watches my work, that they feel something, that they think about something, that it creates lively dialogue. Or, in some cases where I've been talking to friends of mine as they've watched me navigate my film life, you've inspired me to get out. I'm like, hell yeah, do it, right. And then they'll send me a picture of it, or they'll post it, and of course I'm out there high-fiving, because I want them to take the piece of art that I've created. And that spark might not, it probably won't lead them to being an actress, but it leads them to something in their life that's important to take an action on and actually fulfill on it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's your journey definitely has inspired a lot of what I do, because I see you keep cranking. It's like, I'm going to keep doing this because this is what I want in my life. And I think what's also inspiring to me is the way you continue to check in with yourself to make sure it's still what you want.
True.
I see far too many people that go for this goal or a series of goals, and they don't take any time to reassess to make sure it's still what they want. Mm-hmm. They just keep hammering at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that self-reflection process is gold. It's absolute gold, platinum, copper, silver, every valuable metal you can imagine, because inside of that valuable self-reflection, I can't speak for any of you guys out there listening. I take stock of myself and my ego and where is it that I want to go and what it is that I want to convey. And you do need a very strong sense of ego in any kind of performance capacity, whether it's yours, like with your music or with your authorship. You need, and especially as women, and even doubly so more if you're minority, you need to have that strong ego that holds your safe space while you develop. But that self-reflection does help you check in to say, hey, am I doing this for the right reasons? And when I continually get that resounding yes, it's like full speed ahead.
I love that you just said this, because not long ago, I interviewed a guy named Bryce Aree in Denver, and he said something really similar, and he was talking about his software engineering career.
Wow.
That he had to check in with himself and make sure what he was doing was still in alignment with who he wanted to be, how he wanted to experience himself. Mm-hmm. So I love that you brought that up, because we can all do that self-reflection and must.
Oh, every field, it doesn't matter what field you're in. Whether you can be the stay-at-home parent, or if you're running a Montessori, if you're running the city, if you're pursuing an art, everything. I think self-reflection is one of the most valuable tools we have as human beings, and it requires absolutely zero but you and your presence. And whether you want to sit on some grass and meditate, or if you want to take a piece of paper and write those things out, I have like feet's worth of journals and
yes.
things that I just write down. It's like, am I doing this right? What am I conveying? How am I going about it? Self-reflection is gold to me.
I always think of self-reflection in terms of making sure that my actions and behaviors are in alignment with how I want to experience myself.
Right on. Right. Absolutely on point.
Yeah. Huh. That's so interesting. So when you think about the movie Swing, so for our listeners, it's a couple that have hit kind of a boring part of their marriage. And the story, the 22 minutes, goes through Mary deciding to do something about it. And she, did you buy the swing?
Yeah. My character, his name is Terry. It's kind of ambiguous whether or not she actually purchased it or it shows up by accident. And I do believe in the fates and the muses out there. When you're in a relationship, you have a cocktail. You have a cocktail of chemistry going on. And you're bringing things in. I'm bringing things in. And each of us has our own vision of how this is going to go forward. And the muses just have a way, God, if you will, unicorns, happiness. I mean, the universe,
energy, whatever it is, the tide.
The tide rolls in, and it brings these objects, these events, these people that make you stop and go, wait a second. How did this show up? Why did this show up? What are we going to do about this? Do you like it? Do I like that?
So without giving too much away, what I love about that object, the swing, which listeners, you're just going to have to see this movie. It's so fabulous. It's 22 minutes. And if you have to pay for it. I'm telling you.
Well, but good news on that, but keep going.
That object becomes a character in the movie.
It does.
And I love that as a storyteller, as somebody who coaches other people to share their stories. I always say you have to bring in other characters. Your story can't be just you. And I can tell you, I've had some podcast episodes in the past where it was like pulling teeth getting people to talk about the other characters in their stories. I asked one man, well, who inspired you? Who supported you? Maybe somebody inspired you to do this. He was one of these people that was given not much longer to live if he didn't get healthier. He was obese and wasn't walking, was eating really crappy food. And he got himself together and lost like 200 pounds. But he could not, I don't know if he didn't hear what I was asking him, but I kept asking him, who helped you? You can't be the only character in your story. And he couldn't find another character. And that's boring.
It is.
But for an object, the character in many of my stories is Mount Helena because I hike on it so much.
Yes, I'm a big fan of your material you put out. It's like, oh, what's Sarah doing today?
Thank you. But every story has to have at least two characters, even if that character is an object. And I love in that movie how that particular object becomes a character, a beloved character in a very bizarre way. I just love the nuance in it. And for our listeners, I think the best actors are the ones that can say everything without actually having words come out of their mouth. Tom Hanks, Steve Martin, Bernadette Peters, their expressions. Sigourney Weaver.
Yes.
She's amazing. Whoopi Goldberg. One expression, and you know exactly what words would have come out of her mouth if she wanted to say words.
There's pages of stories in that face,
exactly,
or in the eyes.
It's a paragraph description in one expression. So you and Andy both. There were so few words in that movie. I'm telling you, listeners, you have to see this movie. I was shocked, honestly, that as soon as it started making the circuits of the film
festivals.
Film festivals, thank you. This menopause brain where I lose words.
Yes.
Those film festivals, I was shocked that you weren't immediately in high demand after that movie. I really was.
Yeah, I think by the time we hit the film festivals, it's been interesting to me on the other side of the pandemic. Everybody, I'm envisioning everybody going home and staying in their houses and like completely staying like separate from everybody else. There was so much art being made. It's like, shh, don't tell anybody, I think all the stories that are coming out and there's quite a story with how the Swing did finalize in June of 2022. And it was after my director, we'd filmed it about 6 years ago, and I'd kept talking to him periodically, and he had a pretty sizable family setback, which he's pretty private about. So we'll just leave it at that, and
for sure.
As the family, in a beautiful way came back around and things, it just came full circle, a happy ending. And I was so happy for the family as things turned around in the middle of the pandemic. I was looking for things to do too. And I started reaching out to people, and I knew that, at the time, my director, Brock, I wanted to be a good friend to him, and that was all that mattered, that his family was okay. And, we got a Hollywood ending. They were beautiful. They're healthy. They're beautiful.
Full recovery.
It's full recovery. Everything's amazing. Right. And so I'm like, hey, Brock, that film that we filmed a few years ago, where's that at? And, there's so much that happened in the pandemic, and that's like podcast after podcast after podcast. Suffice it to say, though, we were all struggling. Everyone was struggling to stay together, pull together, stay motivated, just get their day in. And for quite a few months, Brock and I would talk back and forth. And I became aware of the fact that, this might not go anywhere. Right. And I need to be okay with the fact that we filmed a beautiful movie. It's in the can. And as I continued through my career, maybe to be one of those things, like an Easter egg that would show up, hey, I did this great film some time ago.
An Easter egg
filled with
whiskey that aged very well.
That aged very well.
Not an actual egg.
And so it was February of 2022 or so. I am at my computer one day. I put my hands out and I said, "Okay, I set you free." And I went on to do other things. I cried a few tears, and it was probably about 3 months later. I got this random email from Brock saying, hey, I don't know what happened. I got this fire underneath my ass and I got the film done and blah, 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 blah. And here's the link to it.
And it was basically waiting for final editing, right?
It was final editing, some sound. It was just little details, you know, and when we were coming out of the pandemic, little details, 3 of them could just knock us flat.
Right.
Because we were just surviving. Everyone was just surviving. And it was more than just three little details, but he sent it over. I watched it and I got immediately on the phone. Brock, this is amazing. We have to get this out. He goes, well, it's like, no. He was worried a little bit about it not being relevant, having, you know, some time in the can, as they speak, so to speak, as they say in film. You get the film in the can and it can go through post-production hell. And I said, no, Brock, there's real connection with these 2 people that are basically out of orbit with each other, and how they come to or don't come back into orbit. That's the, you know, the whole mystery.
The question is,
that's the question. Is it going to happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Are they going to find each other again?
So and once Brock and I we really got the gelled chemistry. He's such a darling friend, and him and I, we just go back to some student films and other like arts projects, and other films that we've done. We got our connectivity together and decided to make a festival run of it. And I do believe, because at that point, people coming out of the pandemic, that's when we're seeing all of our post-pandemic. It's like, this is what I was working on.
Right.
And there's timeliness of it. What was being said was very timely, but if there's like a saturation of it, or if some other voice in the arts of varying sizes and shapes, it could be like the Western genre.
Right.
If that voice is louder or more, you know, vibrant, then like more quiet suburban story might kind of like go by underneath the radar.
But it didn't.
It didn't. No, we had a healthy run. I think we had 12 film festivals
that accepted. So our listeners, most of us probably don't know what this means in terms of how films end up in these festivals. My understanding is that it's almost like auditioning them, that you send them to a variety as a submission, and then they either accept you or don't.
Yes, they'll have a film festival, and there are many in every state across the United States, and also in foreign countries as well, or across the seas. And for example, like we have 7 or 8 Montana film festivals, and each festival is set up with a judge or panel of judges from the community, other festival involved people. They'll decide like, oh, we want our festival to take like a review of grief. And I had this happen with one of the festivals here in town or in state. And so even though our film was really good, he was focusing on grief.
Right. It's topic area, right?
Yeah.
And
so
if you don't fit the theme, you just don't fit the theme.
You don't fit the theme. So but yes, the way that works, you get a film, you submit it to the film festivals, you kind of curate your way through. You don't want to submit everywhere. And it's also about $30 to $50 for each submission.
Yeah, it's like college admissions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you curate a number of festivals where you think this might land and resonate with an audience or with the particular genre, if you're lucky enough to know what that is. And then the film festival will have its date of showing, and you can go screen it if you're selected. And then from there, the film can be awarded arts awards for its artistic creation, acting, cinematography, directing, and whatnot. And ideally, especially if you have full-length features, you run into or connect with distribution. Right. With short films, it's a little more tricky because there isn't distribution. Usually you will self-distribute and it will go out on YouTube or Vimeo or other platforms right now that host short films, and they're fun. It's kind of like reading a magazine versus, a novel.
Right. Oh, okay. So you submitted to how many? The movies, I know you have a whole bunch of movies out there, but I think it helps for our listeners to have one particular story to follow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Swing Story.
Swing Story, we submitted to, I think, 48 film festivals, somewhere 42 to 48. It was in the 40s. And we went all across the country. We did go overseas, and we were successful in landing in the Scotland International Film Festival, which was exhilarating to go for. And we played in India. Wow. which I thought I was like, I would have loved to have gone over for that. And I'm trying to think if there were any other overseas viewings. Pretty much everything else was in the United States, everything from Iowa to Burbank, which was...
You were accepted to a lot of them, right?
we got accepted to 12 or 13 festivals.
That's
and so we got 35-ish no's.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And what about the awards?
There were several film festivals that recognized its artistic merit and entertainment value. We started off with the best romantic comedy for short film from the Portland Short Film Festival.
Oh, that's so cool. So that's Portland, Oregon, for our listeners.
Yes.
When you're in Montana and you hear the word Portland, you generally think Oregon and not Maine.
Yes, Portland, Oregon. And then, yes, the film did garner Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Original Short Story, Best Actor. And I had 3 nominations for Best Actress, and I did garner 1 win for Best Actress from the Wyoming International Film Festival.
Yay!
Yes.
That's so cool.
Yes, that film festival is awesome. I appreciated their hospitality and their willingness to give artists a voice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's turn this back around to be more about you and your story, less about the film. When you think about, we've talked about this, just the two of us, and I've been wanting to capture this story for a while. When you think about a time in your life, maybe when you were a child or a teenager, that you knew this is what you wanted. Listeners, when you eventually learn her full story, you'll understand why it took a long time for her to get to this point. But from your childhood or teenagehood, what is a specific incident that you realized I need to be on stage or on film?
I was probably about 6 or 7. And Lord knows, I didn't know movies were something you could actually go do as just a regular human. Somehow I figured they were like superhumans that did this. But I loved movies. And I was left alone. And I had to say, like, I was being babysat. And we had VHS tapes. And I had put in this VHS tape. And the title of the story was Cat Ballou. Jane Fonda was starring in it. I will never forget it, with this her facial expression and her perfectly coiffed hair and the denim shirts and the checked shirts. And there were 3 villains in this story, and they were after her, and she was getting away from the bad guys, and she opened the window and she dove out the window to get away. And I thought, I want to do that. I want to be in that story. How do I get in that story? I want to go play with her. And that was the beginning of me wanting to do that as a soul calling. I had no process attached to it.
Well, you wouldn't at that age, right? You don't know how to get there, but you knew you wanted to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was the first film project that you worked on?
Oh, gosh. Film project.
Or the one that you remember the most?
Well,
from the early days.
From my early days, it was preceding film. I was on stage. And the thing that I think following that movie was one of my very first roles on stage, and I played Minnie Mouse. I was 9 years old, and they had a tribute to Disney at my school, and they had taken collectively the entire school from kindergarten to 4th grade and did various pieces from Disney. And I had auditioned to get the part of Snow White, and I was perfectly looking for it, except that I didn't have brunette hair. I lost the part to someone in my class that had ivory skin and, long brown hair.
So they were typecasting.
The typecasting. It's like, I could have done a great job. How rude.
As a kid.
But Mrs. Wagner said, I really want you for another part. I want you for Minnie Mouse. And I was just devastated. and so it wasn't until sometime later, throughout the rehearsal process, and I stood outside the theater door the night of opening night, and I was holding the hand of Mickey Mouse, Joe Kaufenberg, and the doors flung open, and I was dragging Joe by the hand down the aisle of about 250 people. It's like, oh, I'm here. I'm arrived. And I got up on stage and I could feel the wave of energy coming at me. And it's like, oh, this is fun. I got to send that back, And that was my first actual experience of being on stage and knowing that there was energy around me and that I could play in it and entertain people with it. So yeah, between the film and that, I felt like where I lived in such small towns, I've lived in, like you top of our discussion or chat here, you talked about me living in a small town.
Right.
And I've lived in small towns. And I think as a small town artist, your call to the arts kind of comes to you in these waves and clarities, and then you go back into the fog, because where I was at the time, there was a small theater. And then when my family moved from Minnesota to Montana, there was no theater. So I would discover music, and then I would set it down. I would discover dance and drill team, and then I would set it down. And then I discovered cross-country running and discovered, oh, I have asthma. I can't do that. So there was a lot of push and pull, discovering a real route to stay fully embodied as an artist. And staying embodied as an artist came to me as a very young adult, and I had 2 kids at home. And one of my friends said, hey, I'm going to go down and audition for a play. Do you want to go? And I went, yes. And it woke up again. And it was the same feeling I had when I was 9. I walked on the stage and I said, oh, I'm home.
What was the production?
Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Oh, I love the music from that production.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, beautiful music.
And it's ironic that first step onto the stage as a grown-ass adult, I got to don a black wig. So it's like, where was this wig when I was when I wanted to be Snow White? When I wanted to be 9 years old. I was a dancing girl, and I tore up the stage with 3 other ladies as Egyptian girl dancers. And that was the first time I felt the beginning of that embodiment as an artist.
As an adult.
And the journey from that point to here, yes, you're right, has involved coming and going from theater projects in our local community theater at Grand Street, opening a black box theater with a group of friends when that folded over a period of time. And that is where I was able to really spread my wings, because the director of that theater company, IT Productions, Jerry Morrison, really, he just let me fly into productions. And if I wasn't on stage, I was behind scenes. I was backstage. I wanted to know how everything worked. I wanted to be a support person to everything else. I did tickets. I swept floors. I would go hang posters. But when that folded, it was like, again, the art just pulled back. There was no art for me.
Right.
And one of my friends said, hey, you've attempted some modeling, you've done pageant work, you've done theater work. What if you take that and you roll it to the film acting? And I went, Cat Ballou. I can get in. I can get in.
It's time. I want to go jump out of a window.
I want to go jump out of a window. I get to do that. Yes, I'm looking forward to my first Western or other.
That's coming up.
Some other action film that I can do that in. It was about 13 years ago. I rolled all of that theatrical skill, the modeling attempts that I'd made. I've tried ceramic pottery and painting, dancing. I rolled it into film acting. And at the time, again, being small town, there's no infrastructure for that training.
Right.
And so it was like, how do I do this? And so I said, well, how is everybody else doing this? And I would find people that I admired. Like one person was Halle Berry at the time, and she went to school at a Margie Haber studio in California. And it was at that time, Margie, she didn't know me, but I was looking at how can I make this happen? All they have are 6-week classes.
Right.
What I needed to do was go down there and be there. I still had kids at home. And that was not in my value system to leave my kids. So, it was probably a year later when her studio offered a 2-week intensive. And that was my first introduction to LA industry standard training because she had 2 weeks. I took 2 weeks off. I took out a loan. I went down. I had to find my way. So before I had an iPhone. So I would bring my paper Mac, I'd map up my route, and I would go as far as I could, and I would stop at the gas station. I'd map out the rest of it, and then I'd get my car, and I would drive to training.
Amazing.
And so, it's become this really long and meandering journey through a lot of different time and space and traveling and belly flopping hard. Things didn't work out, getting up and figuring out, oh, this worked. Let's do more of this.
Yeah, and less of this.
And less of this. That hurt, or this just didn't work. And if anyone's been following the film industry, there's been a lot of turmoil with the writer's strike. The directors almost went on strike, the actor's strike, and IATSE, and there's now, I think, the vocal actors and video gamers. Everyone wants to have fairness in contract. And to preface that, before that, the pandemic, that connected us like never before. Right. Zoom and, before it was Skype. I really believe that the arts, they were global before it busted wide open to being a global market. And now with more film landing here, I'm like, yes, all of this long journey, we're going to keep making it mean something.
Right. Absolutely. Oh, I love that. And I really think that those of us who take the longer journey to get to what we love are much more confident that it's the right place. I see people who go right into what they want to do or they believe that they want to do, and they spend decades in it and then suddenly have this crisis of, I spent my whole life doing this, and now what if it was wrong? What if there was something else I should have been doing? One of my podcast guests did that as a chef. He knew at a very young age he wanted to be a chef. So he poured his heart and soul into that and worked himself to the bone. And suddenly, I think it was 28, totally burned out, totally never wanted to cook again. So I think our more meandering journey of discovery often ends up with us being in a place, or people in general, being in a place of more comfort and confidence in where they land.
Amen on that. The comfort, the confidence, the competence, and I would add to that an incredibly rich tapestry of experience, because I have done everything from digging ditches to corralling horses to all kinds of administrative work. I mean, everything, and house cleaning. I've painted. I can trim my own trees. I've snowboarded. I've mountain jog. I hike. I have a rich tapestry of things.
And there are very few characters that don't have something in their story that involves something that you've already done.
Yeah.
Most characters have some aspect of that, whether it's putting up pickles.
I can do that. I've done that. Embroidery, my dad, I don't know how many cords of wood that my dad and my mom and I did.
Right.
And my brother and sister, my mom taught me embroidery. There is just a little bit of something I've done.
And you can't bring that stuff to a character if you don't have it, if you haven't had those experiences. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, so we're going to come full circle. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on this podcast is because I'm a big believer in making sure that the people that are doing this kind of work, hard work, inspired work, loving, provocative work, that they need more exposure, that it makes sense to make sure your voice is amplified so that you can continue to do what you're doing. So with that, if there's somebody listening to this episode that can help you in some way, what would that look like?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I'm a fan of your podcast, of course, and so I'm aware of your final questions, and I've been thinking about them, and I reached out to a few friends of mine. It's like, how do you view me? What impact does my work have? And, and your question, how could someone help me? And I would love to help them. I would love to help the next up-and-coming director or those that are established. I mean, I have in my heart to work with like Christopher Nolan or Todd Phillips. And the reason I pick certain directors is because how they view human beings. Mm-hmm. I would love to help them bring a very valuable and lively and rich piece of Montana art to life in their pieces. And that's what I would love to bring to a director. That's what I offer casting directors and producers, is a high amount of work ethics, a lot of joy and energy. And those kind of people, if they're listening, or when they listen, I should say, I have a website you can reach out to me on. Social media, you can contact me through social media. Go take a look at my website, because it is definitely a big piece of my meandering work. I look at it kind of like a patchwork quilt. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of heart in it. You get to know me. And yeah, I would love to work with those directors that are telling meaningful stories, putting women at the front of the stories. And important characters, mm-hmm. not only for myself, but for my daughters and for a good number of women that I'm around.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect. Yeah, so I guess, listeners, watch the movies, go to the website. All the links are in the show notes associated with this episode of this podcast at elkinsconsulting.com. And wherever you hear a need for a heartfelt actress, especially if it's filming in Montana, that's always a convenient thing.
It's a bonus.
It is a bonus. But this is the time for us as women to support each other, to grow each other, to provide role models for next generations, even our current generation, for women who aren't there yet.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big, big note. Our up and coming generation, we are the trailblazers for. I think it's, in my heart anyway, as part of my messaging, I'm speaking to you big girls sitting on the couch that think that that is not possible for you. It is possible for you, because there are so many big girls out there, basically women who have that adventurous heart and spirit, and they're wondering whether or not they can actually do something for themselves. And whether it's doing something like I'm doing, making a home, getting a garden, starting a business, I'm talking to those big girls out there.
Yeah. We're big girls.
Mm-hmm.
You're big girls out there.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do this.
Yes.
You pull up those panties.
Yes.
Or just don't wear any.
Yeah. That's a whole nother episode. That's a whole nother episode.
And you really have to, do something. So, yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this. This has been such a good conversation. And hopefully modeling, stepping out, doing it, and moving past that inner fear so that externally you can commit and be exactly the person that you need to be.
And you're making it possible, Sarah. You and the way that you carry yourself and the care that you put into your messaging, the space that I've been watching you hold now for years for women, giving them a space, is precious.
Thank you. I love you.
I love you. Hugs. Hugs are coming at you from the podcast here.
Yep, absolutely. You come to Helena, we'll give you big hugs. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining me and sitting on my living room couch to record this episode.
You're welcome.
Listeners, now it's your turn. If you're one of those big girls sitting on a couch, thinking about that dream that you've been holding on to, whether that's, as Mary said, starting a garden, growing your own food, maybe it's being in a movie, maybe it's being a guest on a podcast, maybe it's grand, maybe it's, I don't know, being the next president of the United States. We have your back. You have women in your corner. So what will you do? What's your first step? I'd love to hear from you. Send me a message. Give me a call. Let's make this happen. Thanks for listening.
You must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.